ready to begin our regular scheduled board meeting. We're sorry for a little bit of inconvenience. We're all getting used to some new technology, so it takes a little bit of time once we come together to sort out all of those things. So thank you for your patience. At this time, we'll have roll call.
Mr. Alexander.
Present.
Mrs. Baylor.
Here.
Mr. Bravo.
Present.
Mrs. Lasher.
Here.
Mrs. Mansfield.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Reverend Walker.
Present. At this time, we are very happy to have our NG ROTC with us, as they have been all summer long. So we thank you for their presence and thank you for staff that has worked so graciously with them and with us. So at this time, may we stand?
Color guard. All. Order. Colors. Ready. Cut. Right. Face. Freeze and colors. Ready. Cut.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Carry. Colors. Ready. Cut. Post. Forward. March. Color guard. All. Order. Colors. Ready. Cut. Post the colors. Ready. 2. Up, out, face. Airy. Colors. Ready. Cut. Forward. March. Color guard. All. Order. Colors. Ready. Cut. Right. Face.
Hello, everyone. I am Matthew Malchuk. I'm the commanding officer of Ellet CLC's NJRTC program, and I'll now let my staff introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Amelia Pritt, and I'm the Air Rifle Team Commander at Ellet CLC. And after I graduate high school, I would like to enlist in the Navy and become the first female underwater welder.
I am Matthew Malchuk. I'm going into the 12th grade, and after high school, I'm enlisting in the Navy.
I'm Tyler Alawine. I'm going to a junior, and after graduation, I would like to be a civil engineer in the military.
I'm Muksam Nimbu. I'm going to be a sophomore, and I want to be an astrophysicist after I graduate.
My name is Colonel Lionel Urquhart, and I am the Senior Naval Science Instructor at Ellet CLC. I have the Naval Science Instructor in the back, First Class Petty Officer Joseph Grieco. And we wanted to thank the board, Superintendent James, Reverend Walker, and all the board members for giving us the honor of doing the colors throughout the summer. We appreciate it, allowing our students to introduce themselves. For those of you who don't know much about JRTC, it's a program that's elective at all the high schools, not all the high schools, but 4. There's a branch at Brookdale for the Air Force, Kenmore Garfield has the Army, and East has the Marine Corps. The Navy obviously is at Ellet. It's to train students to be good citizens. The majority of students do not go into the military, surprisingly, but the majority of them do serve in one way or another, either as police officers, firefighters, EMT, teachers, in the healthcare profession, and those who don't do those professions volunteer a lot of their time. So we're very thankful that Akron Public Schools supports Junior ROTC, and hopefully you'll see a lot of our graduates in the future doing good things for the community. Thank you.
Faith, Eric, Tyler, ready, Hi, forward, march.
We are extremely grateful for our junior ROTC and can't wait for the underwater welder and for the astrophysicists, as well as the others that have wonderful aspirations and beginning right here at APS. So surely we are APS proud. At this time, we'll have our community reflections. And if any board member.
I'll go first. On Saturday, a couple of us went to Ellet CLC for the new opening, and it's a beautiful building. The people who were there, the students especially, as well as the parents, they really enjoyed the opening. They really enjoyed being there. They're excited for this new school year to start to be in a new facility, new school that they're going to be in. And so it was very nice. The band director, Mr. Grom, had the students play well as usual. And our junior ROTC was there as well, and they always perform well. So we were glad to be there on Saturday for the opening. And then the other thing that I had was today, I went over to Garfield Kenmore High School, and today they had their priority schools opening. And it was really enlightening, exciting. There were staff from Brookdale CLC, East CLC, North High School, and Garfield Kenmore High School who were there, and they were addressed by Dr. Tyrone Howard, who is from the UCLA, who came and spoke with them in reference to why equity matters. And I thought that was really important because we have to be aware and understand that equity is important, not for just some, but for all. And so we wanted to make sure that that is known well throughout the school district and hopefully throughout the city and the county of Summit. And but Dr. Howard is very good. He's a good individual to come and perform or to speak to our staff, and he's going to be here also this year at a couple other all these schools, if I'm not mistaken, to come and do some more training with them. Our student ambassadors did a great job of welcoming staff into the building. They did a really good job. The culinary at Kenmore Garfield was outstanding. I mean, they had a continental breakfast, but it wasn't a continental breakfast. It was, to me, better than a continental breakfast, even though it's called that. So they did a good job. And there were students from a number of other schools that were there, and I don't know their names in all the schools, but they were there and they did an outstanding job. Our students did a really good job of being part of the program, as well as the staff there. So I was excited to be there. I'm always excited about equity because that's something I really feel strong about. And so was glad to be there this morning. Thank you.
I'll also add to the Ellet opening, walking in that school for the first time and really seeing what it means to have a college career academy in a physical space was awesome. I mean, you saw logos from partners, but you also saw the physical representation of that. So kudos to the entire team responsible for that. It really was neat to see what it could feel like when life comes into a school and when you can see these pathways outside of just high school walls. So that was fantastic. Also got to see the opening of the basketball court at the I Promise School 2 weeks ago. The coolest basketball game I think we will ever see. The Fab Five, original Fab Five against 5 students, 10 students that kind of alternated. It was amazingly cool. The tip-off was won by students and not LeBron. It was very neat. And we got a tour around the school. Personally, my grandmother and grandfather, who are part of school districts for a long time, got to go on that tour too. So thank you very much for that. That was amazing for them. And we also got to see some new elements of the school. The kind of resource area for families just felt so good when you walked into it. It felt like a haven for families, and whoever decorated that, I would really like some help decorating my own home. And also we saw a new mural downstairs. There were lots of men featured on the first mural, and this mural featured powerful and really inspiring women. And then the last thing to mention was the Akron Roundtable I went to last week. An interesting topic and a speaker who I think got some mixed reviews from the audience, but it really inspired some good conversation at our table, at least, on gun safety. Not really pros and cons about gun ownership, but if there are guns in our community, how do we make sure that we are teaching safe practices around them? So I'm excited to learn more about what we can do as a district to kind of partner with some of these organizations that already exist and who are doing a good job at that.
I just want to continue. Oh, you want to go? Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, and I won't take up too much time. We have a couple of really good presentations, I know. But I also wanted to echo Ellett. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. And to Morgan's point about seeing the College and Career Academy, sort of the physical manifestation of that, I can't wait to see what happens with the beautiful resource center or library. Lots of collaborative spaces built in on the upper floors, so can't wait to see sort of how that plays out between the different classrooms and how they figure out how to work together and what to use those spaces for and how they'll use them. So very exciting. And this CLC project has seen a lot of different versions of this board, different versions of leadership on this board, different folks in senior staff. So kudos to the board members that have been here through all of these wonderful projects, to the superintendent and the treasurer, senior staff, Deb and Paul, who's no longer here, and Rob, and all of the folks, and Ellen's group and Mark's groups. I mean, really wonderful, well thought out buildings that, probably are obsolete now that we are, planning for the next generation of buildings. But kudos, well done. It's a beautiful building.
I just want to say that I echo both Bruce and Morgan's comments regarding Ella, but one thing that really stuck with me was talking to Adam Grom and how he spoke about the children that, come to his program, which is the music, band, and whatever else that has anything to do with instruments. He was just saying it doesn't matter how they come to him. He can use them in some capacity until he gets them to the place where they can feel like, they have confidence and they feel like they can really join at a higher level. So to me, that was just special for him to share that. He doesn't turn anybody away. He just takes them all in and he just grooms them and works with them until they get to a place where they can participate like the other kids. So that was really good to hear. It was, Ellett is really a model of, I think, comprehensive sequence of buildings. As the buildings rolled out, I think that the architects and the other people that work on the buildings, designing them, they learned from the previous buildings. So now you get Ellett. I only could just imagine what Kenmore Garfield is going to look like, because Ellett is really a beautiful facility, as the rest of our CLCs are, but you could just see the progression in ideas and thought forms as they moved on from school to school to school. So, kudos to everybody that works on those projects, and the core group, as well as all the people who participate and teach and grow our kids up in those buildings. So that was a wonderful experience. Another thing that I was able to do this weekend, talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I actually walked in the Pride Parade, which I normally do every year because I'm a strong proponent of inclusion and diversity. So it was over 20,000 people in attendance at that event. I mean, a good opportunity for all sorts of people to talk to different people and learn some things maybe that you didn't know and some that you might just want to know. So it's just, I look at our city as really coming from some place that really didn't embrace these sort of things, not even talk about equity and inclusion and things like that. And now here we are. We're embracing it and we're actually doing it. It's not just talk, it's actually being implemented. And I'm just proud to be a member of this community and having grown up here and everything like that and seeing it evolve to the place it is today. And I look forward to even more in the future. So I think that's it for me.
I will be very brief. I heard that Mrs. Lasher did a fantastic job representing the board.
Yeah,
so thank you for that. I was at Pride also. I was working for my day job and thoroughly enjoyed it. One of the things I want to mention about Pride was how many young people there were this year who felt comfortable in their city. They felt comfortable in their own skin. They felt comfortable being who they were and who they are. And that was lovely. I think there was much more of that than I think I've seen in the past 2 years. And good for them, good for their parents, good for this community that we support that. Couple other real quick things. Wanted to give a shout out to the Access Shelter. They had a lovely breakfast and recognized a young lady who will be going to Kent State this year. She wasn't one of our students, but she had come through the shelter, and so many of our students do, and families. So I wanted to give a shout out to them. Also, Metro had their 50th anniversary. They're a fantastic partner with Akron Public Schools, so I did want to congratulate them on their 50th anniversary as well. See, that was pretty.
The only thing I want to add, and special thanks once again to the Cleveland Browns and the Haslam family. That football field's coming along amazingly. I wasn't there this past Saturday, but I had an opportunity to go over to Ellett the week before to take a look at it. So I guess it'll be nice once the old building's down, get the ball fields back up and all that. And that's, just like everything else, takes a little time.
Again, we want to thank you for all of your work that you've done this past couple of weeks. Again, thank you, Morgan, for representing the board, and I heard you did an excellent job. So thank you so very much for representing us. Again, I participated or was there at the I Promise School and the unveiling of the basketball court and the other activities in the school. As we know, we're just moving forward in a wonderful way in that building, adding additional class, and now continue to move forward. We've got our goals set for where we want that school to be as relates to the various classes. But again, we want to thank all of those partners who have contributed large sums of money to make those things happen. We couldn't do them as a board, as a institution ourselves, but with the help of all of these foundations, partnerships, we're able to create wonderful environments for all of our children. So again, we thank you for all of your contributions these last few weeks. We don't have anyone to address the board. At this time, we have a special resolution of appreciation. And at this time, we would ask that Dreamer Mason Whitfield would come forward. Whereas Board President Patrick Bravo, at the board meeting of January 22nd, 2018, established an ad hoc committee on student board engagement and asked Lisa Mansfield to chair the committee. And whereas Mrs. Mansfield's committee included Rima Mason Whitfield, counselor in the College and Career Academies of Akron program, and they work diligently to come up with a way for students to engage with board members on a regular basis and have a voice in the actions of the board. And whereas a plan was developed to have student representatives from each high school serve as student board members, with one high school represented at each regular board meeting, and as much as possible, student board members would attend our board committee meetings. For example, the board policy committee, the instructional policy committee, the joint board of review, etc. And whereas Dreamer Mason Whitfield graciously took charge of this endeavor, recruited the students, and provided guidance to them by reviewing the board meeting documents in advance of meetings and advising them regularly regarding the kind of information they in turn should share with board members. And whereas Ms. Mason Whitfield did a wonderful job of working with these student board members during the 2018-2019 school year, and the result was a fantastic interaction of the students with board members, which resulted in the board members becoming more knowledgeable about school issues of concern to individual school student bodies. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of the Akron City School District, Section 1, that board members are very appreciative of the involvement of Dreamer Mason Whitfield in this endeavor, and wish to express their sincere thanks for all the time and effort she put forth to make this a successful initiative. Section 2, that the board members look forward, and we do, to Ms. Mason Whitfield's continued involvement with the student board members during the 2019-2020 school year. And if you've ever seen a mother hen, make sure she takes care of her brood. You surely did that. And I don't think, if they wanted to get out of line, they didn't. Just your look. And for those of us who have a little age on us, we know it only takes a look from your mother, and then that's it. So we are extremely grateful. I'm going to ask that Patrick Bravo and Lisa in the Instructional Policy Committee, got it wrong. Committee would come forward and stand along with us, because you all were the ones that really did the nuts and bolts and worked really hard to make sure that this came about. And so we want to thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
I want to add that the resolution is fantastic, but it doesn't even begin to describe what came out of the process. And it was more than I think Lisa and I could have dreamt of or imagined when Lisa brought this to me and we began talking about it and sort of came up with this plan to put student representatives on our board, sitting at our table, having a voice in the discussions that we're having. It was so much more than what we could have imagined, and it really morphed into just a wonderful leadership program for our students. I mean, every meeting that she had that began with thoughtful exercises and icebreakers about leadership and what it means to be a leader and how you make tough decisions, to the educational pieces about what is Akron Public Schools, who runs it, who's in charge, who does what, who are all these folks that sit around the table and bring us things to consider before the board. Just to just all the things that they learned and got out of that, I hope was as inspiring for them as it was for us. And so really, thank you for everything you did. It really was more than we could have imagined.
I'm going to just add real quick. So we sat here last summer at this time saying, we're going to go with this. We're going to start this. We're going to put this out there to the schools. And we figured, well, the first year will be kind of, it'll be catch as catch can. No, it was on. And we had students by December, and we had students at the table by January. again, this board and this administration manages to work together in a way because of people like Dreama, and I wish we could recognize everybody for all that they do, but she especially stood out this year. She took what could have been a test year and turned it into an exemplary year for these students that from now on, the students are going to have to live up to. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to the board for this opportunity, and to the superintendent, and to all of my family and friends who are here supporting me. If you all would please stand. I've had a very long history with Akron Public Schools. I recall when my mother, Margie Smith, who now serves as a sub for Akron Public Schools, enrolled me at Grace Elementary School. My first grade teacher was Miss Hurst, and every day she would turn over a card that had a letter on it, and that's how I learned to read, and I remember that to this day. One day at Grace, I was on the playground and I fell ill. And a very tall, thin, kind teacher came and took me to the main office and gave me a cold compress for my head and for my neck. And I never forgot that experience. And his name is Dr. Sylvester Small. I moved on and I went to West Junior High School, which doesn't even exist anymore. And I had some fantastic teachers, Mrs. Conway and Mrs. Gifford. And they took a select group of us down to Marietta College for an overnight trip. And that was my very first time being away from home without my family. But when my feet hit that college campus, I knew that college was in my future. I also had an outstanding school counselor. His name is Ernest Calhoun, and he said to me, Dreama, you are so good with words. You have to find a job that allows you to use words because that is your strength. So I took those nuggets with me and I moved on to Central Howard High School. And that was the funnest time of my life. I was a pom-pom girl, which was a part of the band. And at that time, Joe Vassilotti, he was the band director. And every year we would go away to band camp. We had to be on the field at 7:30 and we had to stay at 3:30. And those things really built character in me. But when it was all over, I canoed, I horseback rode, I swam, I ran with the cows, and it was just a great time. And then when I got back to school, back in that time, whenever you won a state championship or sports, you got a free day. And a free day meant that there was an open gym, there was a DJ, and I would just go to school and I would just dance my heart out all the time at school. But despite all that dancing, I graduated college ready. I went to Akron U. I breezed right through it. And then when I got out, I wanted to get a job as a teacher with Akron Public Schools. But at that time, competition was stiff. So I had to sub for a year. And that's where I met my mentor, Dr. Flora Dees, and she helped groom me and get those interview skills together. And that next year, I was able to get a job with Akron Public Schools as a teacher. And the beautiful thing about that is that I met a lot of my friends, and my colleagues became my best sister friends. Like, for example, Tracy Buckner, a former administrator with Akron Public Schools. And the most beautiful, beautiful part about all that is I got to meet my husband, George Whitfield, a retired principal with Akron Public Schools. I also was able to have mentors in my life, and those mentors became my great friends too. One of my favorite mentees, who was my intern, is Deanna Edwards, and she is now an academy coach at Bookdale High School. So I mention all of these people because people are the ones who fed into me and made me have this amazing life. And it is my life's work to continue to feed into all of the students and the people at Akron Public Schools so that we can continue this amazing life for others. So thank you all. I appreciate it. And also my very good friend, Pastor Dennis. I met him when I was a school counselor at Perkins Middle School, and we collaborated together, and from that became a very rich friendship where we helped enrich the lives of the students at Perkins. And he afforded me the opportunity to sit on his board, and I have that experience of sitting on a board because of Pastor Dennis and Tiffany, so I want to give them a special thank you as well, too.
Mr. Williamson, did you get a picture? You can see that Sister Whitfield has a way with words. So thankful for her wonderful contribution.
I'd like to make a motion.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and properly seconded. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call.
Mrs. Baylor?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mrs. Lasher?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Thank you so very much. At this time, we have communications, and we have a special presentation regarding the memorial to honor contributions of Akron women in the space program.
Hi, my name is Fred Deaver, and I'm a designer, and I work with Baltimore area.
If you want to just, we have to make sure everybody has a mic
Sure.
so that you can be heard. So if you can just wait for just a second.
TV brain.
See if that's on.
Again, my name is Fred Deaver.
Still. Yeah.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm a designer, and I work with Paul Tamarius, who was generous enough to come up with the idea of erecting a memorial to two very special ladies from the Akron area that were both involved in the space program. Paul wants to donate this memorial, and the two ladies, one is Judy Resnick, who I think everybody is familiar with. But she turned down an invitation to Juilliard to attend Carnegie Mellon. After she attained her BS degree in electrical engineering, she became a designer with RCA, developing software for NASA's rocket telemetry systems. She went on to get her PhD, and while she was doing that, she was able to obtain her pilot's license. After that, she went on to work for NASA after she was recruited for their astronaut training program. She was a engineer developing the flight and orbital systems for a lot of their satellites while she was doing that. Of course, she was specialist on maiden voyage of Discovery, which made her the second American woman in space. And of course, I think we all remember the Challenger disaster as well. Jean Hickson is someone probably you're not familiar with. She was not born in the Akron area, but you want to talk about Jean? Okay. No, I was going to, but yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name's Paul Famarius, born and raised in Akron, educated in Akron, and will be a lifelong resident of Akron, Ohio. Jean Hickson was my third grade teacher. My second third grade teacher. I flunked the third grade because my English was so poor. My mother came from occupied Greece after the war. She was in a forced Nazi labor camp. And of course, the first language I was taught was Greek, and everybody else were foreigners except our family. So my second third grade teacher, Jean Hickson, took me under her wing and taught me English. Kept me after school, drove me home at night, and taught me how to be an American. I'll always remember Jean. In fact, I have a picture of Jean Hickson hanging in my office with Wonder Woman in the middle and my mother on the other end. So she's very dear to me. She was my third grade teacher at Forest Hill School. And I'll never forget the lady. Also, she was the second woman to break the sound barrier in the jet plane in 1957 when I was a student in the 3rd grade. So Jean Hickson is a very special person to me. Then there were 13 women astronauts selected. And Congress got real scared about sending women into space at that time. So they had to find a reason not to let the women go, even though some of the women were much better than the men at the task. So they said, if you weren't a test pilot, and no women were test pilots back then, you can't be in the program. So there were 13 women astronauts that were bounced out of the program, unfortunately.
She also did not get to go. This is, obviously, I can speak up. No, I can speak quite loudly, but Jean Hickson also, excuse me, was excluded from the program. Primarily, the one reason being is that the spacesuit didn't fit properly, which obviously, as a female and pretty vocal, is completely beyond anything that we would recognize now in this time in our world. She also, she was the only woman to break the sound barrier, and was part of the Mercury team. So she should have been there, but she was bumped only because of being a woman. And now, just to follow up, the head of the NASA program this year is now a woman. So women have come a long way, but without Akron women, who knows?
It also probably bears to mention that she was a school teacher with the Akron school system for 30 years. So, so she, like Paul said, she broke the sound barrier while she was a teacher here in Akron. Also, Paul didn't mention too that his connection with Judy Resnick was he went to high school with Judy in when she was valedictorian of your high school class, correct?
Kind of a funny story. She sat next to me in high school at Firestone, and very quiet young lady, didn't say 2 words. Then at the 10-year reunion, she came up to me and said, Paul, how you doing? I go, Judy, you remember me? She goes, I was always amazed by you in high school. What are you talking about? She goes, you sat next to me in Mrs. Metler's class, and I was always amazed how you could keep your head erect and sleep at the same time. So that's my last memory of Judy. And I've gotten into a lot of space things because my company restored the Saturn Apollo rocket at for the Smithsonian and NASA at Cape Kennedy. It's now in the Apollo Center. And we've done a lot of interesting work like that. But Judy was always laughing in my head when I think Judy Resnick.
So the proposed memorial would be in front of the Judy Resnick Learning Center on West Market Street. Approximately where the old wooden Indian carving was. Skip that. Paul talked about the Mercury 13. This will be the memorial driving west on West Market Street. And what we're proposing is basically it's a a scale mock-up of a mercury capsule, which Paul has a fiberglass mold of from other space projects he's worked on. And we would mount that with a kind of a chrome plated arm mounted to a polished concrete base. And surrounding that, in the plaza, we would have brick pavers that we would have inscribed from donators. And from those donations, we would be able to fund 2 bronze statues, one of Gene Hickson and one of Judy Resnick. So we have about 4,000 bricks that we could actually sell for donations. So that should cover the cost of those statues, and then whatever residual is left over would be donated to the Learning Center. This is a plan from overhead, and one of the obstacles that we would have is that we are in the pathway of Dominion's relocation of their gas lines through the front of that property. So we have talked to them, and they're willing to reroute that. And I'm going to show you some pictures here too. You can see the highlighted area there where their underground passes ours. You can see from these pictures that where those flags are, between the 2 pink flags running parallel to the street is where they propose their new gas line route. And it goes through some of the trees that are existing there, and it would certainly go through some of the root systems as well. So all of those trees that sit out in front of the school would probably be gone. So I don't know if that's been considered or not, but like I said, we've talked to Dominion. They've recommended or coordinated with us, and they were willing to move the gas line to a different location, either behind the trees or route it around the monument, if it's approved. And that's the approximate location where the Indian once stood. Will be at the site of the memorial.
I hope the school board is part of our team. I'd like this to happen. We restored the Atlas rocket and the Mercury capsule for the city of New York. And doing that, when we took down the Atlas rocket, we found out the capsule that was on top of this rocket that was left over from the 64-65 World's Fair was an actual capsule. So I went to the city of New York and told them, hey, why don't we, instead of putting it back up on top of the rocket, we'll build a fiberglass mock-up and build the escape tower. And we have the plans, and I made the mold to make at least 10 more Mercury capsules. Why? Who knows what would happen with them. So I have them in our possession. I'm willing to donate all this. I'd like to lease the land so we can go forward as quickly as possible from the school and give it back to them as soon as the monument's done. That's my thinking, and I asked the school board to come along and with my thinking and pass this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your presentation. I know the superintendent and staff will get back with us because there are a lot of other things that need to be considered. And then This is just a presentation. It's not an official resolution. And then we will get back, the superintendent will, with you as to what direction would best fit the school district. But we thank you for your outstanding work and for thinking of those two outstanding women who are part of the Akron community. So you will be, I'm sure, hearing from the superintendent and staff rather quickly so that we can move forward in whatever direction or options that we have.
Thank you so much.
But thank you so very much.
Thank you.
At this time, we need to approve our previous meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Bravo,
Yes.
Mrs. Lasher,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Reverend Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mrs. Baylor.
Yes.
At this time, we have our personnel recommendations.
Mr. President, I have before me for your consideration 42 personnel recommendations in categories 5 through 16. These recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions or comments at this time? Yes. You have your
an
hand up.
introduction for the principal or no?
I'm sorry.
The one.
Yeah, we
Yes,
will
he's
have
gonna
one.
vote.
Right.
All right. Hearing none, roll call.
Mrs. Lasher,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Reverend Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mrs. Baylor,
Yes.
Mr. Bravo.
Yes.
And we have Kathy McVeigh to introduce one of our administrative appointments.
Yes.
Sorry for jumping the gun there. I was so excited.
Microphone.
Good evening. Tonight I have one introduction. Baron, if you could please come up to the podium, please. Tonight I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Farron Ranko. She is a graduate of Worcester High School, obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in Early Childhood Education from Wittenberg University, and in 2019 she obtained her principal license. She came to Akron Public Schools with 10 years of teaching experience from Brooklyn, New York, Charlotte, North Carolina, Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, and at Middlebury Prep Academy in Akron, Ohio. She was awarded Teacher of the Year in the 2010-11 school year. In August 2016, Ms. Ranko was initially hired as an elementary dean for Leggett and Reimer CLCs. She worked in this split assignment for 2 years. Farron brought with her a wealth of knowledge and experience as she continued her journey to Akron Public Schools. In June of 2018, Ms. Ranko was recommended for an interim principal position at Pfeiffer Elementary, and tonight we are recommending her for the principal position at Pfeiffer. Congratulations.
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to serve at Pfeiffer. We've had an excellent year last year. We made some really great gains on our state report card last year, so I'm excited to continue to do that. We continue to build the culture at Pfeiffer as a family, and so you are welcome anytime to come and see what we're doing. We are striving to be the very best Akron Elementary School. So we're on our way. Thank you.
And then Pfeiffer celebrated 100 years last year, and most of us know that that's one of our buildings that we really want to do some things if we had some funds. But
We love it.
But in lieu of that, that's exactly what I was about to say. In lieu of that, the culture of that school, the activity of that school, the maintenance of that school with the staff is excellent. And as she has mentioned, it has a family atmosphere and has an outstanding principal. And so we're just grateful for the work that they're doing in spite of the physical plan. The work that they're doing there speaks well for Akron Public Schools, so congratulations.
Next, Mr. President, I have before me for your consideration 4 motions and 5 resolutions on the consent agenda in category 21. These recommendations are in proper form and I move their approval.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Reverend Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mrs. Baylor,
Yes.
Mr. Bravo,
Yes.
Mrs. Lasher.
Yes.
Reverend Walker, can I just say one thing? I just wanted to point out that we do have the 21st century grants in that resolution for Akron After School with our partners through AMHA and the city of Akron, so we appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other comments or observations? Not?
And finally, Mr. President, I have before me for your consideration 19 business affairs recommendations from category 23. These recommendations are in proper form and I move their approval.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and properly seconded. Any questions or comments?
Yeah.
Yes.
One or more. I'm getting used to putting my notes in the new system here. So item 23.4 on Schiffler equipment. Can you just remind me what the equipment is?
It's actually for ballistic film for some of our CLCs and non-CLC buildings, including this one. It's a safety feature.
Thank you. And I believe, I'm looking here, I'm going to have to get better at this. There was a security consultant agreement as well. Is that it, that in here?
The monitoring and security, yes.
But it was for consulting, the one for consulting.
I think that's the one you just pointed out, Scheffler, 23-4.
You're talking about 2319.
Oh, yes, it was. I had 2 questions on that one. That was where my other question was. Thank you very much. Is that for, we had talked earlier in the year about physical security surveys, essentially,
Right.
assessments of all of our buildings?
Yeah, that was done last year under an audit with the ESC of Northeast Ohio.
Right, and is this a follow-up to that then?
Part of it is, yes. So it's, like I said, it's actually a ballistic film, and they're doing the consulting and the installation of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Reverend Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mrs. Baylor,
Yes.
Mr. Bravo,
Yes.
Mrs. Lasher,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
At this time, superintendent's report.
I have one item, Mr. President. This past week, we had an auction to sell off approximately 10 properties, unused properties from APS, including buildings and some vacant land. And I have Deborah Folk here to review the results of the auction.
Good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
As you remember, last October, the board approved that we go forward with some obsolete properties to dispose of. And then you approved Kiko auctioneers to do those auctions. That auction did take place following tours of all the buildings that anybody wanted to and public auction announcements on Wednesday, the 21st. We opened at 4 o'clock, from 4 to 5:30. They were allowed to look at all the documents that were given any kind of questions or asking approval of any kind of information that they needed. Bidders came in, they were assigned a number, and we opened the auction at 5:30. It was a very interesting auction. It was what is called an umbrella auction, which I can give you a short explanation for. Basically, if you came in, you would have seen on all the screens the 10 properties, 2 vacant and 8 with buildings, numbered 1 through 10.
When we opened up the auction, those bidders went ahead and started bidding against each other. Under round one, we ended up with a bid that was the highest bid, and that person that won that bid could select anywhere from 1 to 10 properties at the price that was bidded. The top person that won that bid selected one location. When they did not want to go any farther than that one location, then it was opened up to the floor for anybody else that wanted to bid at that top price to select any of the other properties. No one wanted to participate at that point, so we went to round two. Round two we got to the second highest bid for round two. That particular bidder selected a property. They didn't want any more. We opened it up, and we had a second person at the second price select another property. So this kept going on very actively till about 10 after 6. And we actually, I can report, we sold all of them. Yay. All 2 properties that were vacant, which is the Lincoln property, as well as the athletic field to Goodyear. And we had 8 properties with buildings sold as well.
Wow.
The total price obtained from the auction was $638,550. And at this time, that night, those particular winning bidders were to give a 20% down payment along with selling their earnest offers. At this point, we had 4 people from APS witness this, myself, Jim Leonard, who's our purchasing agent, Peggy Bisson, who is our property manager, and we had Diana Feidel as our legal representative. So you had actual witnesses to this process during the time. Kiko had, their auctioneer was Brooks Ames, and we had 5 people here actively working the audience. It was a spirited event until about the last 5 minutes when we were not sure that one would sell, but it did, I'm happy to report. And we are currently obtaining those title documents so that we can go forward. At this point, we are hoping that you will take these considerations under advisement for the next 2 weeks. The board will ask to be voting on acceptance because that's part of the revised code in which you can take those offers and approve them or not approve them at the meeting of September the 9th. If you do approve those, they will go forward with a closing date of October the 7th. And we have ownership until we turn over those, and we get 60 days to take anything out of the buildings that we still want to go through and obtain, anything that we have not done in the past. So I met with my staff this morning to get them ready to start removing those items should we find. Anything that we do not remove is part of the auction for the winning bidder. So it is very possible that we may have these particular items finished and turned over to the new owners by, I would hope, Thanksgiving to Christmas time. Do you have any questions?
Wow, that's fantastic.
Mrs. Lasher?
Yes.
The funds that we get from those auctions, do they go into our general fund, or is there another line item place?
They are required to go into your permanent improvements. They cannot be used for operations. Mr. James and Mr. Pendleton and myself will then determine what is the best use for the capital projects that we have on the books.
Great.
So they'll be part of those particular capital improvements that you've seen, as Mr. Pendleton has advised you that they need to be addressed in our budget.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Any other? No president's report, treasurer's report?
Under my report, I'd like to direct you to the Finance Committee report through July. 2 items with this. One is on format and the other one's on substance. On the substance item, under the first page, you see fiscal 2020, the very first page under the report, and that line 6.01 on the forecast, which I know Finance Committee is trained to look at, is the amount of revenue over expenditures, or that represents in my report what I call budget deficit, or whether or not we balance the budget. If you notice, we're predicting by the end of June of 2020 a surplus of about $167,000. So on our budget, as you know, it's pretty insignificant, $167,000, but it represents a point in time where those expense and revenue lines are intersecting. And that's definitely a time that we want to begin talks, future talks. That doesn't mean next year's a levy or anything like that. It just means that's our planning time, symbolic to start talking at a public level. And our finance reports have been largely quiet about that. It is a pretty significant event when those lines intersect. So let's at least quarterly or through the monthly financial reports, take a look at that as a board administrative team together. What's that mean? It's early in the fiscal year now, so let's take another look as we approach the end of the calendar year, see where we're at, what we're predicting. The second comment as it relates to the Finance Committee report is on pages 5 and 6. You'll notice the graphics are a little bit different. As we talked about forecast 5, we're trying to make the Finance Committee reports look a little bit like the report card to kind of give you the speedometer, just to kind of gauge where you're at in the fiscal year. I know Mr. Bravo loves seeing this at the Finance Committee, as well as Mr. Miller. And as we relate this back to where we're at in the fiscal year, it kind of gives you a snapshot of where we're at in measuring. And then the last 2 pages, you'll see forecast 5 analytics, some of the dashboard components, and we're really tracking students, poverty, economically disadvantaged data as that's coming back and forth from us into the state. Because a lot of our funding, as you know, under the student wellness funds, under the governor's new initiatives, is determinant about how we get those funds and where we can spend them. The next month, the superintendent and I met today in scrimmage. Next month, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the student wellness funds. And there's lots of rules around them, where you deposit them, how you spend them, if you're required to spend additional. So it's a good time for us as a board and community to just see all of the partnerships that we already have in place that we're spending. The last thing that we want to add are new expenses to the board that are potentially not sustainable. So we'll detail a little bit of those. That concludes my report.
Any questions or comments of the treasurer's report? Okay, hearing none. Committee reports. Legal, contracts, board policy.
Okay, the Legal and Policy Committee, we met on August the 19th, and we discussed a number of things. And one of them was we discussed the recent transition to board docs, which we are currently using. It's very exciting for us. The district enjoys it. It gives us a lot to look into. We can take a deeper dive into a lot of information, just as Mr. Pendleton just mentioned, and it allows us to reflect on our district policies. We also discussed the naming of the policies were reviewed during the meeting. More discussion will take place regarding this topic. So we discussed naming of policies and reviewing them during the meetings. And we also discussed adult diploma program. There are a number of people that come to the district who are adults and they want to receive their diploma, and we are looking into that. What are the requirements that we have for Akron Public Schools? What are we looking at, and what do they have when they come to the district? We're specifically looking at the language regarding adults from other residents attending the adult program, diploma program. So that's a specific. And there's research that's being completed as to whether there is current policies that govern this. So we're looking at if we have any current policies and if we need to develop any others. And we're looking into the requirements that in order APS give the residents from another county or district. And then we also looked at curriculum and instruction policies. The legal policies and committee reviewed curriculum instruction policies that need to be revisions. The policies will be started by Dr. Ella McWilliam Woods for the comprehensive review by the curriculum and department, meaning that we're going to look at have the department heads look at all of the policies, see what needs to be revised. If there needs to be any revisions, we will do that. We'll come to the policy committee, and then we will look at it and we'll approve, or not approve, but we'll bring it to the board as a whole, let you all see it, and then we'll go forward to approve them if we need to. And if there's any other policies that we need to look at, we'll look at those as well. Mrs. Lasher.
Sure. We also talked about public participation. We currently do have some policies in place about how an individual can address the board and when. So not every individual is given an opportunity if they make that request. So we want to understand more about how those discussions are directed to different departments. And obviously this is to protect our students, our employees, and the public's rights as well. And then we also talked about after someone addresses the board, how is it handled and what policies are in place to be sure that it's addressed in the right way coming from the board. So more to come on that as well. The dress code was another item that we talked about. Thanks very much to Mrs. Mansfield. We reviewed some current policies in place, and the student board is actually going to be assigned with the task to review the student dress code and offer suggestions to the board. And then we have 3 outstanding items. Continue to work on the equity policy. This policy is obviously continuing to evolve, and we want to be sure that we're always talking about it as a committee. We also will be updating the Legal and Policy Committee on the new forecasting software to track expenditures and instructional data. And I'll also say here, the Forecast 5 presentation that Ryan gave us in our meeting was fantastic from the sense of actually being able to monitor equity in a way that I don't think we've ever been able to see before. It puts data behind the anecdotes that maybe we hear within or across schools, but we can actually measure and see where things are happening and start to finance things from a values-based perspective and an equities-based perspective. So thank you so much to the team that's been working on that. And then the final outstanding item is creating a new process to engage the department heads regarding our policies to be sure that the folks who know the most about the policies are the ones working on them.
I want to add one more thing. And with the committee, we're kind of transforming the committee. Was a different committee before. Now we're transforming it, so it's going to be a lot more information that we will be able to report out to all of you so that you can hear it as well as the community. And so with Mr. Pendleton's help and all the others who are involved, we're going to have a little more deeper dive into some things, especially with the new software that we have. So it's going to be a lot better for us, and we'll be able to have a lot more information to look at to move our district forward. So just wanted to make sure we stated that. So Mr. Pendleton, thank you for taking the lead on this.
The next Finance and Capital Management Committee.
Yeah, just a brief report. We had also had another presentation of Forecast 5 at our recent Finance Committee meeting, and really phenomenal, really powerful system, and Morgan did a good job of explaining even some of the benefits other than just tracking financial data, but how we can use it beyond just tracking financial metrics. And in addition to that, there were presentations, and Forecast 5 folks met with some of our teams from curriculum and EMIS and IT and other folks to look at its capabilities beyond even just financial metrics. And my understanding is that went very well, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. So there's a lot more, I think, to come from Forecast 5. I love the integration or the beginnings of the integration of some of the Forecast 5 metrics into the finance report is really exciting. So I think we'll see some good things, and it'll be useful for us. We even talked about being able to set up dashboards that are sort of more board view, so that at some point it will be useful for us to be able to go on and see the things that we'd like to see, or even be able to pull it up when we're out in the community and someone asks you one of those questions and you're like, well, you know what? Let me just log in here to Forecast 5 and I can give you that answer. So hopefully that's a reality, but baby steps, because I know it's still a lot of implementation to go. We also talked, and Ryan did an update to the enrollment study that we have all seen before, that really drills down into every building, lets us know how many kids are enrolled within that cluster, how many from outside that cluster, how many are enrolled out, where they go. You've all seen that report before, and I spoke with Ryan, and both that and the next thing I'm going to talk about in next month's finance report, we're going to attach those to the back of the Finance Committee report so that you can see all of those numbers. But again, really good report, and also, again, another plug-in with Forecast 5, which can really work with that data and start to show us the different mobility rates of each of our schools and all of that. So again, just a really interesting tie-in with Forecast 5. We also discussed Energy Star ratings of all of our buildings. You guys have seen those reports before. So we got an updated version of that compared all of the buildings to each other and sort of ordered them. And so we're going to get you'll get that data as well next month as part of the finance report. But that's it for us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Covered it all.
Instructional policy and student achievement.
Okay, there's two items that was in the business affairs section tonight, and the first one I'm going to talk about, and then Lisa's going to talk about the second one. Regarding item 2310, we approved the contract with Dr. Tyrone Howard, who has been doing training and consultation with our principals and schools on equity, which keeps coming up here as of late. Dr. Howard is a professor of education, and Bruce had alluded to this earlier, and director of the Black Male Institute at UCLA. Our priority school staff requested to bring Dr. Howard here to a joint opening professional development session for all the staff at Kenmore Garfield East, North Bookdale, Ennis, and Helen Arnold. Over 600 staff were exposed to these teachings and this information, including teachers, counselors, principals, secretaries, and custodians. They all learned and gleaned from Dr. Howard's expertise on topics such as equity, gaps in our society that are prevalent in schools, and what can be controlled by educators, including perceptions, belief in students, rigor, opportunities provided, and how we talk, interact with students. Dr. Howard will be returning to the district 5 or 6 more times throughout the year to train and consult with our priority buildings. I just want to say this is a response to the community and what their some of their issues with equity and stuff as it relates to APS. So this is a response to sensitivity training, as well as just getting people to understand about different cultures, ethnicities, and things like that, to become a little bit more inclusive, because there's isolation in different areas, and this will help bring some of the people knowledge and understanding of how some of the other ethnicities may, respond to different things and different measures, and just exposing some of the things that we tend to just think without really having knowledge or interactions with other sects of society. So I did attend one of these luncheons that they had over at the Hilton Garden Inn over on East End. So Mary Outley, she was over there, and she was like, "Ginger, you get over here." So I did, and it was really, really very educational. I think I've seen this guy though somewhere else, maybe through our school board travels and conferences. It seems like we've seen him before somewhere, and now he's here, and he's part of our landscape as it relates to equity. So, yeah.
Any questions?
Not so much a question, just as a comment too. And not only does this maybe come about too as part of the response, to the community and the conversation that you see in a broader context in our community about diversity, inclusion, and equity. But 3 or 4 years ago, Akron Public Schools was on the cutting edge when Bruce brought the equity policy to the board, and we passed our equity policy a few years ago. And so just the natural progression of things coming out of this district, always wanting to be, I think, on the leading edge of things, is a testament to Bruce and this board. And so just kudos where they're deserved. That, it was good for us to start thinking and having that conversation a few years ago and following through. So yeah.
Absolutely.
And we also want to showcase the contract with Career Cruising. I just want to mention, we talked a little bit about this at Scrimmage today, and I had some folks in the community reach out. There was an article in the paper that was excellent about Ellet, but one of the things that happened was they talked to a lot of former students, and some of them mentioned oh, I wish that I'd had this, or I wish that I had that. And one of them was they wish that they'd done personality tests. Well, this is personality tests on steroids. This is way more than just a personality test. And every student in Akron Public Schools is exposed to career cruising. Every middle and high school student has their own account. They upload and store everything they need to help them transition from work or to work into college from schools, including resumes, letters of reference, their community service hours, all of those. And all of the students have this. There are career interest surveys that help students explore and save their interests. They click on an interest area if they're interested right now and they want to see, hey, do I want to learn more about this? They watch videos to learn more about the professions in that particular area. It has tools to help students research colleges with majors in that interest area. That saves time, that saves money, that saves parents driving them all over the place, that saves applications for colleges that you don't really end up going to. They can apply for scholarships, apply to college, apply for jobs. The career cruising implementation is managed and supported by DREAMA, who we already recognize today, Ms. Whitfield, and embedded in courses with key activities across the district to ensure that students are building their own portfolio to help them transition successfully to adulthood. So, maybe the folks that were talked to over the weekend didn't have that exposure. Our students now have that exposure, and we're preparing them for the future. I'm excited to hear what's going on in all these other committees.
I know.
We've been really busy, haven't we? I really want to come visit and hear some of what the rest of you are doing. Do want to point out you do, of course, have updates of college and career academies and IPS at your spot as well. I cannot let it go past without pointing out the adorableness, first of all, and brilliance of the students that are on this. That were from North. Learning did not stop over. No, it would for anyone. But, since you went there, the student learning did not stop over the summer. These students had exceptional internships, and there is not only a great picture of them, but also a pretty in-depth description of some of the work that they did and got to do over the summer. Also, if you look at your IPS update, that one has a lot of the important dates. So I'm sure that those will be added into our calendar coming up, but also just so you can look ahead and see what's coming as we're moving forward into the school year, which is Thursday.
I just wanted to say that I personally am experiencing career cruising. And so I'm enjoying it, and it's really interesting because we all talk to our kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, you ask them periodically from time to time, and you talk to them about some things, and they may ask you some questions, and, the rest of them, they're Googling it or YouTubing it, they're asking their friends, and they're getting all the wrong information. But so I really have appreciated this process. It's been really interesting. I'm also hoping it lets me retire early because right now we're on orthodontist. But for those of you who aren't Michigan fans, he did research and choose University of Michigan for their dental program. But it was really interesting to watch him walk through this process and develop his resume and his business card and there's this whole piece from beginning to end. So I'll be curious to see how it progresses. But it's been fascinating. If you get a chance to learn a little more, I would. It's really interesting how they work through it. So
I'm just going to add just a little bit, but that is very important for our students because that's education. That is the holistic aspect of education. It's not just the classroom. It's not just you being at home and learning from your parents. This is a holistic aspect of education, and I think it's very good for our students because it hits every aspect that they need in their own personalities that will help them evolve and grow to be good individuals and good citizens. And so I'm just as Lisa, we're always happy that this started at North High School, but we're going to be happy for all the students because this is very important. And when we look at this aspect also, it's for our students here in Akron Public Schools, but there's going to be important for other school districts to look and see what Akron Public Schools is doing to maybe even produce some of the same type of programs, because all these kids will be working together somehow, some way, in some form together to continue to allow our society, our communities to develop. So I'm really excited about this too, and Patrick mentioned with what they've been doing as far as that cruising. I mean, cruise on,
It's in
baby,
our
cruise
portal,
on.
by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just
You
want to
can
give
have
a
access.
shout out to Dr. Ella McWoods because she, I'm telling you, she exposed us to this very early in the process. And then now, boom, it's here, you know. And I like the fact we're meeting the students where they are as far as technology and how they want to deal with things and, you know, their world, the future world that is upon us. So it's kind of cool. So.
Any other comments or expressions? All right. At this time, any unfinished business?
No.
Any new business? That brings us now to our executive session and our need to go into executive session. And so I would need a motion for our executive session pursuant Ohio Revised Code 121.22G2 and G4. So I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, roll call.
Reverend Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mrs. Baylor,
Yes.
Mr. Bravo,
Yes.
Mrs. Lasher,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
At this time, then, we will recess upstairs for our meeting.